Pronunciation of my last name too. Respect. That's a tough one. Hello. Yes, I'm Waldo Jakewith, and we're going to be talking about a project that Kate and I and two other folks worked on a few months ago that Kate led up the user research and design for. I want to tell you first, by way of context, I'm with a nonprofit, U.S. Digital Response. We are a nonpartisan grant-funded organization that works alongside governments at all levels to ensure they have the capacity to meet the public's needs. USDR leverages a network of pro bono technical expertise, like Kate, to address common systemic challenges facing public servants. That's who we are. That's why I'm here. But let's move on to the actual work we're here to talk about. This is the project that we embarked on here. I'll give you a quick overview. So at U.S. Digital Response, we worked with an organization some of y'all may be well familiar with here, the National Association of State CIOs, or NASCIO. We worked with NASCIO to conduct a 2-month user research project. We wanted to understand how technology vendors, contractors, evaluate solicitations. RFPs are the easiest shorthand for that. And we wanted to then apply, and we did, apply what we learned to the standard templates they use for those RFPs to make those things easier for vendors to evaluate. So anecdotally, vendors don't much like government RFPs. And we wanted to go deeper into why? Why don't they like them and how can we intervene? And we found that there is an easy way to make RFPs less unpleasant for vendors. And we care about this not because of some abiding love of efficiency, but because agencies need better outcomes for technology projects. Those projects are basically all outsourced. So we wanted to figure out how to get better competition at the procurement phase. Government doesn't necessarily need more proposals. It just needs better proposals from the right vendors. So this work was led by 3 U.S. Digital Response volunteers, Kate Drummond, who's here with me today, Mark McGivern, and Shayun Adelana. I want to make sure they get the proper respect for their work here. So the problem that we were getting into, we wanted to go deep into the question of how tech vendors triage new RFPs for IT services. How do they make that initial judgment call of whether a new RFP can be ignored? Maybe it has no relevance to work that they do, or it's just not their kind of thing. Or is it worth a deeper review? So not the question of should we bid on this, just that very first, is this for us? Is this a no, or is this a maybe? That's what we wanted to get more into. And we figured that if we could learn what vendors look for to make that call, we could propose a way to put that information front and center in the RFP. So in our research, we had a few key objectives. The first is we wanted to know how vendors, not just anybody at the vendors, but the frontline staff, the actual person whose job it is to look at those incoming RFPs or trawl through the godforsaken state procurement websites to find out what new opportunities are available. We wanted to find out how they determine an RFP is worth a deeper review and how they receive RFPs. We didn't care what the director of business development or whatever for the vendor thought, didn't talk to them, didn't care. Second thing is we wanted to know how we could, what is the information they look for? What specific fields are they trying to identify? And how can we make that process easier for them? We came to this thinking, we had this sort of loose hypothesis that RFPs needed something like a nutritional label, some way to put the most important information right up front. But we weren't sure exactly what that should look like. And there was really no way to know without actually trying it out and experimenting. So we had to figure out what was the most important information. And the only way to do that was to conduct the user research to figure that out. Next slide, please. So methodology. Our work had these 3 major steps. First, we worked with NASCIO. We wanted to run a survey of their corporate members to find out just, standard what you would imagine a survey would look like, just that. How do they feel about their procurement process? And then using that, we wanted to go deeper. We wanted to interview those frontline vendor employees that we mentioned. And more important than talking to them, watch them evaluate an RFP, give them an RFP and have them narrate their way through looking at it for the first time while we watch to find out what they do. Because what people say they do, we're not reliable narrators of our own lives. We want to see what they actually do. And then finally, we decided to repeat those interviews with another group, a different group of vendor employees from different vendors, but this time have them evaluate an RFP that we'd modified, didn't tell them, based on what we learned in that first round of interviews to see What if we could make some changes? How would that help? I want to say a few words about this concept of user research. I'll start by just reading the definition to you straight here. There's lots of definitions. This is just one. The systemic study of the behaviors, needs, motivations, and experiences of people to inform the development of a product, system, or service. So here's the idea. You want to allow design decisions to be grounded in reality instead of basing them on assumptions. And that could include interviews, surveys, usability testing, or observational studies. But it is not simply asking people what their preferences are and then doing that. We need to uncover people's preferences. As Henry Ford probably never said, but it's a great quote, so let's just go with it. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. This approach of observing people and understanding their needs, this is basically how all software is built at this point. This is very, very normal. We just applied this discipline to one aspect of procurement. So let's start by talking just real quick about the first step of those three is NASCIO's survey of their members. So quick overview of the survey. We worked with NASCIO to put together a survey, which select NASCIO corporate members responded to. We asked a whole bunch of questions, all along the theme of how they feel about the process of reviewing RFPs. Next slide, please. So I just want to name a few interesting findings that we came up with here. First, we just asked them the difference between observing and asking. This is just the asking phase. We asked them, what is the very first thing they look for in a new RFP to figure out if it's right for them? So these are the top 5 that folks selected from a much longer list, and based on how many people said they look for it. Number 1 was evaluation criteria. Everyone wants to know, when we bid, on what basis are you going to decide who gets the contract? The due date, how much time until they have to provide their bid. The presence of contractual issues, and it's basically this basket of frustrations that vendors often have with government of some of the requirements they put in RFPs, and they want to know, are we going to have to deal with these things? Are these in here or not? A little telling that the number 4 thing on this list is, oh, can we actually do this? I would think that would be number 1, but I would be wrong. Number 4 on the list is, this is actually a thing that we do. And then the number 5 thing is, are they prepared to spend the money that it actually takes to get this work done? So these responses were our first indication of what information vendors might want to have highlighted. We also had to ask this open-ended question to vendors of, what do they want to see in a cover letter? Because often RFPs are just like an email that says, see attached PDF. Like, what is this? So what do they want to see in a cover letter where they get an RFP? And it was open-ended, just say what they want. We grouped those together along 9 themes. And these were the top 5. Goal, why? To put it more bluntly than they did, what are you trying to do with this RFP? Often it is surprisingly difficult to find out what the heck they're trying to buy. The number 2 is time frame. What's your schedule for this? Number 3 is budget. Number 4 is, what are the requirements? Like, what are you requiring of vendors to perform here to be successful? And then number 5 is what the selection criteria are for deciding who gets the contract. Some of these are familiar from things that we had seen in the constraint question as well. But this is our second indication of what vendors might want to have highlighted. And then the final thing I want to name about these survey results is this last survey finding of note is what vendors said to be the most frustrating about the procurement process. And you can see there are these, and we gave them a list to pick from, but you can see there are 3 runaway winners or really losers here. Number 1, frustration, lack of communication. Number 2, time frame. And number 3, lack of clarity. So vendors feel like they don't know what agencies are trying to buy, and that process is being rushed, and it's frustrating for them. Next slide, please. To talk about the interview phase of the research, Kate did the interviews. So I'm going to hand this over to Kate to talk about the work that she did there and what she learned. Are you losing a battle with your mute button?
There we go.
All right.
All right. So moving into our next phase of the research, Mark, my fellow researcher, and I scheduled one-on-one remote interviews with vendors reviewing RFPs. So when describing their process, all participants initially scanned the document looking for information. Some use AI to summarize RFPs, especially if they appear to be lengthy or complicated. While many participants use keyboard shortcuts like Control F to quickly search for key terms that might be important for their review, like budget, or specific to their specialty, such as human-centered design or agile. If an RFP looked promising, some reviewers will use an internal decision tool to score the RFP, and others could spend hours just reading through the entire RFP. So we asked interview participants when deciding to make a bid what information is important to know, to which they answered clear problem, scope of work, submission criteria, budget, project timeline, and minimum qualifications. So continuing these themes and trends that we uncovered in the survey for information that reviewers are consistently looking for. Some frustrations when reviewing RFPs is that they are often inconsistent in their formatting or structure, especially amongst state RFPs, and they use complex language. One participant in the research said it's time consuming just to understand what the structure is and where to look for certain information. Based on the survey findings, vendors are reviewing anywhere from 20 to thousands of RFPs per year, depending on the size of their company. So that combined with this complex language and lengthy, inconsistent formats can lead to a single RFP taking, again, hours to read and sometimes days. So the second half of the session, we switched to focus on usability testing. We took an actual RFP and had participants walk and talk us through their review. And then just a note here, New York State Office of Children and Family Services was not associated with this research. We only selected this example because it was a standard representation of custom software projects. So we asked participants what information would help you decide if the RFP is worth a further review and the order of their importance. And again, we're seeing similar mentioned key information: submission criteria, budget, minimum qualifications, scope of work, due dates. We also asked participants, how easy is it to find the information you were looking for based on this RFP? And we got a score of 3.4 out of 5. One of the higher scores said, they gave me the calendar up front. Don't bury the asks. Like, okay, here's your calendar. Here's what I need. How many pages I need to write by this date. So they found it relatively easy to find that information they were looking for. On the other hand, with a low score of 2, our participant said it took to get to section 5 before you even knew what the work was. I think it was on page 15 before we even knew it was for a not-for-profit and we weren't even eligible. So when asked what would make an RFP easier to review, they consistently said they wanted key information to be highlighted. One participant mentioned, I think putting all of that, the core information, up front would be helpful, or maybe just putting all the contractual requirements in a separate volume or appendix. Other thoughts on making RFPs better included having a clickable table of contents. Something that simple would make navigating RFPs easier for reviewers. Our participants would like RFPs to be shorter, which I feel like this one might be a perhaps easier said than done. But one mentioned it was maybe 5 pages and not 63, because that's a lot to get through. Our example was actually 71 pages, but RFPs could be hundreds of pages at time. So once we had a chance to go through all the interviews and the notes to look for the trends, we applied that data. And even though most states have different RFP standards, the introduction of an additional page could help reviewers based on what we've learned. So the hope was this would bring the most searched for information to the front of the document using plain language, which would then relieve the burden of trying to decipher and search through lengthy RFPs. That in turn will reduce the time spent on bid or no bid decisions. It'll also provide a consistent element across state RFPs that would be easy to implement. So our proposed solution was the summary sheet. It highlights the most searched for information, can be added to RFP templates relatively easily, and again, reduce that bid time determining the bid. So in our last phase of this research, we wanted to test our concept and observe how people would interact with the summary sheet. As Waldo mentioned, we didn't tell them, we snuck it in there, and we started sessions with the same set of questions as the previous round. So all of these reviewers felt that RFPs were unclear and find it difficult to give appropriate responses. One participant said, a lot of the time an RFP may not be written well enough so that you get an appropriate response from all the parties interested in bidding. Others thought that RFPs were too prescriptive. One said, you're really trying to answer questions based on requirements versus actually talking what's best in the market. And then another said, our sweet spot is if a client can articulate to us what they want us to build, but then they don't go into all the hows. So essentially, vendors and subject matter experts in their fields would like more of an opportunity to find the best solution for their problem that they're trying to solve. So some of the ideas from this group to improve RFPs included a table of contents again with clear labeling. They'd like separate sections for procurement rules and for project scope. A checklist to help manage their submission criteria would be helpful. And then more clarity around the current state and future state of the project, basically where it is now versus where they want it to be. So to test our proposed solution, we included it into our new example RFP, and again, had participants walk and talk us through their process, this time with a particular focus on this additional design element. So reviewers, again, are consistently looking for the same information and have similar pain points: timeline, budget, scope of work, submission criteria. And then using timeline as an example here, one participant said, I look at the initial deadline. If it's too soon, then I've had times where I was like, we're not going to make it, so I don't even apply, even if it was something. So having that key information up front, they can immediately see this timeline is too short for their organization, so they would pass on an opportunity, even though it might be a good match for them. Another key lesson that we learned from the summary sheet is the importance of a well-written and detailed scope or executive summary. So on our example, I actually wrote the executive summary and it was imperfect. And as the participant said, so again, a challenge statement of why you're submitting this, because I don't know. Have you already developed? Have you already deployed? So talking again about that current and future state, where it is today, what has been done, and what needs to be done. We again asked our participant how easy was it for them to find the information they were looking for, and this time we got a perfect score. And here are some thoughts when referring to the summary sheet. This is the key information that I take a look at and put into that bid evaluation form that I talked to you about. This was another vendor that used an internal tool or checklist to determine whether they would bid on an RFP or not. So having this information up front makes it easier for them to input this information to that tool. Another said, I like that overview that gives you a consistent framework. And that was in relation to having to look at many different RFPs from multiple states and at a federal level too, and being able to have a consistent thread amongst states for easier review. Some additional information that participants would like on the summary sheet included evaluation criteria, contact information for the procurement officer, preferred or existing tech stack, and then any key personnel or specific certifications that they might need to hire for. And with that, I will hand it back over to Waldo for next steps.
Thanks. Okay. So we learned all of this. There's a whole process, but like, now what? What do we do with all this information? What do you do with this? What do you do in specific do with this information? So first, let's talk about applying what we learned. Obviously, using this summary sheet where you saw bits of it up close just now, but you just put the most important stuff up front. Like that seems like an easy win. That is not hard. Those of y'all with government, that I hope would be an easy sell. Those of you with the private sector who are bidding on things, maybe you harass agencies into doing a better job of describing their solicitations. But we believe, and I'm going to emphasize believe here, we're going to come back to that. We believe they'll result in a faster decision-making by vendors. Because if a vendor can review a solicitation and quickly decide to bid or even not to bid, which is also really valuable, that's a win for the agency because it increases the number of vendors who can consider bidding, helping the right vendors opt in and the wrong vendors opt out. And that should, again, emphasizing should result in a higher percentage of proposals that are a good match for the agency's need. And the use of these across states will help with the common vendor frustration that there's just no consistency of RFPs between states or even between agencies within the same state. And we'll drop in a link to a print version of the report. I see somebody asking in chat. A print version of the report that includes a Word file, just a one-page Word file that could be dropped into solicitations. We'll drop that in here. to make that real easy to find. Once we're done talking to get to Q&A, I'll find that and put that in. Thank you for asking about that, Sonia. Um, so general recommendations. I was surprised to come away with these and delighted. That's why we conduct user research. It's not just to validate what we think we know. That's good and useful, but also you have to be prepared to learn new things. One of the things we learned that I was in no way prepared to learn, I never expected this. First recommendation here, provide a nice table of contents, as it turns out. So this example, I hope communicates it well, that these are both from actual solicitations. We didn't create either of these. I'm not saying that the one on the left is an ideal table of contents, but I am saying that vendors sure prefer it to that one on the right. They like the larger font. They like that it's not crowded. You can see there's bolding and all caps for some sections, for the major sections, which make them stand out there. They like, you can't tell this from the screenshot, but what are the one on the left? They can click on each entry and go straight to that section of the RFP. And they like the plain language. Look at the language on the one on the right. I know it's kind of hard to read on the screen here, but like RRB.A.03 A.general RRB provision -3 billing. What the hell? What are we doing here? What is this? Why title it that? Nobody asked for this and nobody wants this. The one on the left, while by no means like an ideal model of plain language, is a vast improvement over the one on the right. Probably the one on the right was just auto-assembled from some template language that's been handed down like a trusted family heirloom for generations, and nobody's ever stopped to say, wait, do we have to call it this? So anyway, better table of contents. It was a surprising recommendation we're able to provide here. Also, being clear about the problem, both as it is today and what the desired outcome is. From 2022 until I'm losing track of years. From some date until January, I was with the US Treasury and I reviewed many of the solicitations issued by the IRS for anything relating to technology. Most of the time, I didn't understand what they were trying to buy. And I'd have to tell them, I have no, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're trying to procure here. I've read the whole thing. I don't understand what you're trying to buy. Be clear about the problem as it is today and what the outcome is. You can't expect bids that make any sense if nobody understands what you're trying to buy. The third point is provide enough time for people to provide bids. If you want a 100-page proposal, you got to give people time to write 100 pages. If you want bids faster, require less information, but you have to have enough time to get a good submission. And then finally, to the point of some of these vendors, when it's appropriate, don't be too prescriptive in the definition of the work to be done. And I say, like, when it's appropriate, because if you need to buy 10,000 widgets, just say you need to buy 10,000 widgets. But particularly for these big custom software projects, you want to give space for vendors to have clever ideas in order to do something new instead of agencies prescribing solutions in the RFPs, because vendors frequently feel that those solutions are the wrong solutions. Those vendors want some room to innovate. Next slide, please. And I want to wrap up here with the need for additional research. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to be done. I want to call back to the beginning where I'd said we had this hypothesis that we needed something like a nutritional label. Now, it turns out the thing that I had in my head was way too small. There's a lot more information than vendors need. Turn out we need an entire page. And the stuff that I would have thought was important, I was right about some of it. I was wrong about others. Research is what makes all of this get better. So here are some areas to explore more. These are really important one. I was emphasizing like should and may a couple of slides ago because we haven't measured how well this works. We know that it makes vendors happy. It seems logical that it should result in better bids, but maybe we're wrong. So it's important to uncover for organizations that work in this space, what impact do these have on proposals and the resulting contracts? Do you get better proposals? Do you get fewer proposals in a way that's good because they're better proposals? Do you get more in a way that's good because there's more? I don't know, but longitudinal research will need to be conducted here. Understand the state's RFP writing process. We need more research here. Anecdotally, I know treasured family heirlooms, these things are just being handed down. Like I know that, but research into this would be really helpful. Who's writing them? How frequently is it contracting staff without sufficient domain knowledge? How often is it the subject matter experts that don't understand procurement? How well do those divisions work? What knowledge do they have about the industries that they're writing these things for? And then finally, what other industries would benefit from these summary sheets? Like, this summary sheet is really bespoke for a custom tech project. You couldn't take this and use this in anything else. Don't do that. It wouldn't work. Not all the questions make sense. So if you wanted to take this and apply it to something different, let's say it's for hardware or for cloud hosting services, it's just narrowing to IT, you need to ask different questions, but we don't know what those questions are without conducting research. And if you wanted to go beyond that to procurement on the whole, you got to conduct enough research to understand for each one of those, what are the important questions to ask and what are the answers to look for. So that's where we'd like to go a little deeper. We have to repeat the process that they've gone through here for other industries. It's not difficult. Repeating that isn't difficult, but somebody would have to do it. And the work of US Digital Response is pretty narrow. What's on these big custom software projects? We don't work in those larger areas. So that concludes the slide portion of this presentation. I just like you to have like two conceptual takeaways here. The first is for custom IT projects, just use a summary sheet. It's real easy. Just do it. We'll drop in the link here. But the second is research is really important with actual end users to understand how to make things better. And there's no reason why we can't apply that to procurement. And it's neat that we did that for this first thing. But I think there are some good organizations that have been working in this space for decades and will keep working in this space for decades, who I think are going to be continuing to advance this for years to come. That's our presentation. Sorry, Jess, we should give you